I'm Heath Lambert, and you're listening to Marked by Grace, a podcast applying the grace of Jesus to all of life. What is the history behind stockings at Christmas? That's what we're going to talk about this week on Marked by Grace. We have sort of a series unfolding over years on the podcast here at Marked by Grace, and it is around Christmas time. We take a week or two, depending on the year, depending on when Christmas happens, to look at a tradition that we celebrate during this season of the year. Normally, during the year, I take your questions. That's why the podcast exists. If you've got a question you'd like me to answer or a concern you'd like me to address, maybe a Christmas tradition you'd like me to unpack in the future, you can send that to markedbygrace@fbcjax.com. That's markedbygrace at fbcjax.com. But this week, we're talking about the tradition of stockings. In 1823, one of the most famous poems in history was published, and it was called The Night Before Christmas. And one of the famous lines in that poem says, "The stockings were hung by the chimney with care in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there." Now, that poem, published in 1823, means that at least by the early 1800s, the tradition of stockings were established. The tradition of stockings hung on the mantle, hung over the fireplace as a place where gifts would be placed in celebration of the birth of Jesus Christ. But as a matter of fact, the tradition of stockings, even though we know it was established by 1823, we know it goes back much further. And in fact, the tradition of stockings goes all the way back, actually, to another tradition, the tradition of St. Nicholas or Santa Claus, which I actually talked about on an episode of Marked by Grace, December 19th, 2022, if you want to go find out more about St. Nick or St. Nicholas or Santa Claus. But stockings are connected with the tradition of Santa Claus because one of the legends around the story of St. Nicholas happened around 300 AD. So my goodness, you're talking over 1,500 years, even before the night before Christmas. And one of the founding traditions for St. Nick is that an impoverished family in the ancient world with 3 daughters that had no money and would not accept charity needed money for the girls to live, for them to get married and have the hope of a future. And St. Nicholas of Myra, overheard of their struggle, learned of their plight, knew they would not receive charity. And so in the night on Christmas Eve, the night before Christmas, he crept into their house, and the stockings of the young women were hanging over the fireplace after they had been washed, and they were placed there to dry. And St. Nick took gold coins and he placed them in each of the young girls' stockings, where the girls found them the next day on Christmas morning and were overjoyed by the gift. Now, listen, there are parts of that story that are doubtless made up. There are parts of that story that we know are true. For example, we know a bishop named Saint Nicholas existed around that time. But our ability in unpacking the tradition of stockings to be able to separate fact from fiction in that tale is not important, because regardless of what parts of it are true and what parts of it are made up, the tradition stuck. And in commemoration of St. Nick's act of charity towards those young women, stockings began to be hung over the fireplace with the hope that they would be the receptacle for a Christmas gift. It's a natural place for socks to be hung, for stockings to be hung. that's where you would dry your laundry, and so stockings would naturally go there. But that's the origin of the tradition of stockings as a receptacle for gifts. Now, as the tradition developed, at first, the stockings or socks were your own personal stockings or socks that would be hung over the fireplace. But as the tradition developed, you started looking around the house to find the biggest pair of socks. You'd go looking in Dad's sock drawer. Eventually, it developed to trying to find the nicest pair of socks or stockings. Obviously, if we're going to hang these things up with hope that it's going to be a gift, it's becoming part of the celebration of Christmas, and we don't want just a pair of dingy socks, certainly not anything with holes in them where the gift is going to fall out, but we want the stockings to be as nice as possible and as large as possible. Eventually, the tradition develops where stockings were made for the special purpose of receiving gifts, and they would be decorated and become very fancy and ornate. And that's similar to the stockings that we hang on our mantle. One of the most significant developments in the history of stockings happened with the tradition of Christmas trees. Now, I'm not going to talk about Christmas trees on this episode of Marked by Grace. I'll point you back to a past episode of Marked by Grace, December 12th, 2022, where I talked about the Christmas tradition of Christmas trees. But with the development of Christmas trees and the widespread use of Christmas trees, stockings almost became extinct. And the reason for that is because both stockings and Christmas trees are connected with gift giving. And so for the same reason that you try to find the biggest stocking possible so you can get the most gifts in it on the night before Christmas, is the same reason why a Christmas tree is a better place to put gifts than a stocking, because you can fit more gifts under the tree than you can in a stocking. You can fit bigger gifts under the tree than you can in a stocking. And so for a brief period of time, the existence of Christmas stockings was threatened by the widespread use of the Christmas tree. But eventually, the tradition of stockings survived, but it survived with a little bit of a limp. Probably in your house, and if not in your house, you're familiar with the tradition that the big gifts on Christmas morning are under the tree, and smaller gifts are relegated to stocking stuffers that go in those stockings hanging over the fire. In any event, now they are firmly ensconced as a key part of Christmas traditions for most people. That's definitely the case in the Lambert house. One of my favorite things about our Christmas tradition, one of my favorite things about our Christmas decorations in our house. I'm definitely going to be doing it on the night that you listen to this podcast in our living room. On the other side of the room from where our Christmas tree is our fireplace. And above that fireplace are the stockings that belong to my family, my favorite people in the whole world. Years ago, when Lauren was pregnant with Carson, a precious family friend of ours gave us these heirloom stockings that were embroidered with our names on them, Mom, Dad, and Carson. And every Christmas, when we add a new member to our family, we add a new heirloom stocking with an embroidered name. You can see who is included in our love and affection by seeing who has a stocking over that fireplace and what names are embroidered on those stockings. The gifts that are placed in those stockings as stocking stuffers on Christmas morning are far less significant in our home and in my heart than the names that are stitched on them. And so this Christmas, now that you know the history of Christmas stockings, I hope you know the joy and the pleasure of seeing stockings hung by the chimney with care as a demonstration of the love and the care of the family that you are going to celebrate Christmas with this year.